Hello, my name is Tanner Swanson, and I am presenting my Real Utopias project on the South Dakota Native Home Ownership Coalition. This was a very interesting group to dig into, and I'm excited to share what came of my inquiries. So first is to kind of just establish what the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition is. It's essentially a group that's really focused, I think the mission captures it best, on creating and increasing homeownership opportunities for South Dakota's Native people to build strong and healthy communities. And you'll see through the presentation that they do this in a variety of different ways. And when we look at the readings and we look at packaging or policy change or all sorts of different types of methods of innovation and changing communities, this group is actually engaged in a number of them. And I think that's all captured in the what statement as well. A collaborative network of tribal, nonprofit, government, and financial institutions working to increase home ownership opportunities for Native Americans across South Dakota. And I think all of those different stakeholders being in that description makes it clear that this is a systemic effort. It's not just one stakeholder within a process, it's the entire process working together to try to move the needle. So some of the learning objectives here is, how has that work changed access for homeownership for Native families? What form of innovation best describes them based on the readings? How does SDN HOC measure success beyond economic indicators? So culturally, life-wise, those hard to make tangible subjects. What does their grounding in Native values function as a form of cultural transformation? So that kind of stems out of the other one. What type of culture are they bringing to the table? What mechanisms have they established to scale their impact? How do they work collaboratively? And how would they potentially be able to be adapted to other environments? So first is, how has their work changed access to homeownership for Native families? Before the coalition formed, Native families in South Dakota faced a lot of very challenging odds buying homes on trust land. Traditional lenders typically were not going to give mortgages to those folks because there were approval processes that were slow through the BIA. Collateral wasn't allowed on those loans. And so there needed to be a change in order for the incentive structure to make sense for people to even offer mortgages in those areas. So their policy advocacy directly changed that landscape. They helped launch the USDA 502 relending pilot, which was a program that enabled Native CDFIs to relend USDA mortgage funds directly to tribal members. So it's putting lending power into the hands of Native CDFIs who understand tribal processes and can expedite the mortgage process. So it makes it a much more appealing opportunity for financial institutions. They also influenced the passage of the VA Native American direct loan reform, and that opened the door for Native veterans to purchase homes on trust land as well. And together, these process reforms have led to over 360 loans worth nearly $25 million, and that's almost a 700% increase in trust land lending. That's pretty substantive. So they didn't just increase access, right? Just providing additional mortgage funding or just changing the process of how to secure a loan or how tribal partners would approve that. None of those could happen in isolation. They needed a multifaceted approach that changed the entire incentive structure to, one, make it make sense for these financial institutions to participate, two, put the power of those financial institutions through lending authority into the hands of Native communities, and last is just making sure that that process overall is simplified and easier to access. So what form of innovation based on the readings do they fall under? So Alvord and others in the readings kind of put forward three main forms of social innovation: building local capacity through capacity building, disseminating a solution through package dissemination, and movement building. The South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition really operates as a hybrid of all three of those, which I think is a marker of true innovation. When you're working on all of those fronts. Now, I would contend that their movement building is what defines them most, where they're leading state and federal policy reforms that allow for capacity building. Once that policy change goes through, they allow for package dissemination of here's how to go about getting those loans, right? It builds capacity, right? Through workforce training, home buyer education, strengthening native CDFIs, and it disseminates those solutions by creating replicable loan packages and down payment programs that other tribes can adopt. And it builds broader movement through advocacy overall, again. So this combination makes SDN HOC not just a service provider, but a social catalyst, right? They're fundamentally changing what it means to make loans, own homes, and be a member of the tribal community seeking home ownership. And not only that, but again, I think one of the most important elements is that they are putting that lending power in native CDFIs. They are putting that power and that authority into the hands of those who best understand these communities. So how do they measure success beyond economic indicators? Well, they track traditional outcomes like the number of loans, new homes, what's most compelling. To me, is how it redefines success beyond money, right? So 360 loans, $24.8 million financed, 344 new homeowners, and 85 new homes built. All of that is great. But what's, I think, key and in their reporting is how it leads to community stability overall, right? There's fewer families leaving the reservation due to housing challenges. It empowers those on tribal lands to stay there, feel ownership of the land. It changes their fundamental relationship to those lands. It provides opportunity to those who are participating in the native CDFIs, right? They get opportunities to do more, lead within the community. And then last, it fundamentally also changes the type of financial decision making that households on tribal lands can make. And that is both a function of having a mortgage and going through that process, and also all the other work that SDN HOC does through their counseling and their training. So this starts to make homeownership a cultural and community achievement. It's not just an economic achievement for those who are participating in the program. It's an overall achievement for the community to fundamentally change what it means to live on tribal lands and own property on tribal lands. So in what ways does the coalition's grounding in native values function as a form of cultural transformation as well? Because that is really, I think, key to SDN HOC's identity, right? This is a native-led organization shifting power dynamics to bring that power to local tribal communities. And when you do that, it fundamentally reframes homeownership, what that means to communities, to individual households, what sort of responsibilities that the community has to homeownership, a sense of reclaiming that land, and empowering Native institutions overall. So it really is not just about the function of what's happening, of increased mortgages, more home ownership, right? That's key, but fundamentally changing what it means to own a home on tribal lands, to have security on tribal lands, that's fundamentally changed by the work that they're doing. So what mechanisms has SDN HOC established to scale its impact sustainably while maintaining local control? Now, I think there's kind of two elements to this. One is, how are they scaling? And I think they're scaling by growing within the system, right? So up front, we kind of took a look and said, okay, so they're engaging, right, government authorities, lending authorities, the communities who want to purchase homes, right? They're getting all stakeholders involved in creating change, which upends the system, right? Now, because there are so many differences between tribal communities, scaling across tribal communities based on that custom program is very challenging. So their goal, in my mind, is to scale within the community that they are already proving good at serving. So they've done that, I think, through a couple different initiatives. They've done it, I've spoken a lot about the CDFI network, but they also have their Great Plains Housing Initiative, which assists with expanding affordable housing production, really investing in the folks who are actually building these homes and managing the funds, down payment assistance programs to help households actually purchase those homes and get those mortgages and qualify for them. And potentially bring their payments down to make them more affordable. And then also their membership of actually having coalition members to bring more stakeholders to the table to make it more feasible. So I think that's how they're innovating in that space. If they're scaling out within their community, within an established solution. The next question, I think, gets a little bit further into what might this look like in different communities in terms of scaling. So how does SDN HOC practice adaptive, collaborative leadership and organizational learning? I think this is actually a huge distinguishing point for them. So I already kind of mentioned that I think one of the greatest strengths is these native-led CDFIs and local efforts to bring that decision making, that nebulous federal, financial, institutional decision making, and bring it down to that local level. And that's what makes it adaptive. And each tribal environment, it was very clear, is so different. So what works in South Dakota through this effort isn't going to work in other states or reservations across the country, but it will work in South Dakota. And part of that reason is because it's so well connected to the folks who actually live there. And so that, I think, is key to being adaptive and collaborative. And that comes through coalition-based decision-making, right? They have grown dramatically in size as a coalition. They have a ton of stakeholders systems-wide in terms of how do you promote home ownership, right? You have home builders, lenders, policymakers. Everyone's at the table to make this happen. And when you get that many people to the table, you get collaborative leadership, right? Anyone who can bring that many stakeholders to the table, collaborative leadership. And then because they're doing so much active work in the community, they have so many mortgages going out to the community, they're building homes, it creates a learning process. So those trainings, those hours of one-on-one support that they get with members of the community, that also lends itself to help them design a program that's effective. And then lastly, they make it very clear through their process as well that they base their programming on community feedback and policy shifts. And this lands us at the question of, could this model be replicated? And I would say the approach can, but not necessarily the exact solution that they've created in South Dakota, right? I've mentioned that tribal communities are so different across the entire country. The cultural values, the government policies, all of these different things require a lot of stakeholders to come to the table and make decisions individually for that specific community. But the approach that they've taken, which is native-led governance structure, cross-sector coalition, right? Again, bringing government, financial, community members all to the table, and then focusing on that multi-pronged approach of not just getting into package dissemination or movement building, but doing all three of those primary methods of innovation to create a systems change that allows mortgages to be easier to make, to have a community that wants to take on that financial obligation. All of those things are crucial, and making sure that it's grounded in the cultural values and data that the organization is able to gather. So that approach, absolutely, yes, can be done, but it's not a one-size-fits-all. It has to be tempered for each community it's in and tailored to that specific regulatory situation as well. So thank you so much for watching my presentation. The South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition does absolutely incredible work. They have upended a system that has traditionally just entirely left out tribal communities from home ownership, making financial systems accessible, making sure that regulatory regimes don't get in the way of people seeking home ownership. It's incredible what they've done, and the approach is, I think, their greatest strength. And it's specifically unique, I think, when an organization's approach is their greatest strength and not a specific strategy or product, but how they go about organizing. That, in my opinion, is what gives them endurance to last a long time. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much.